Welcome to Just to Know You, the podcast that interviews regular people at SAES and finds out they are far from regular.
That's right. I'm your host, Darian Batten.
And I'm Angela Kerskaden.
Let's get started.
First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. As you know, you were the keynote speaker, and I think you probably saw the picture of all the teachers that sat and listened to your speech, and it was fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'd like to find out a little bit about you. Where are we speaking to you now? Where are you located?
Yes, and thank you all for having me. And I had a really good time. I'm actually in Houston, Texas now, but from the DC, Maryland area.
Okay, so you grew up, or is that where you were born?
So this is so random. I was born in Chickasha, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, so random. I lived there for a few months, and my dad, who is a minister, he got a job in the DC, Maryland area, in Southeast DC. And so when I was a baby, we moved up to the area, and that's where me, my three older brothers, where we were raised.
Nice. So there's four in your family, four kids.
Yeah, four kids, but we have a large extended family and church family and friends. So yeah, it always felt like a lot of us. But yeah, three older brothers, and I'm the youngest. And by the way, I have an identical twin brother as well.
Oh, that's very cool. How did you like being a twin?
Oh, it was fascinating. I always say that he's the yin to my yang, and we balance each other out perfectly to where,
Yeah.
I can hop on a podcast and get a countdown and I'm ready to go. It's like camera action. And my twin, it could be a room of 1,000 people and you will have no idea like he's in the room, like
Uh,
he's very insightful, he's very intuitive, and he's watching and listening and observing. And to me, I want to come out and be the life of the party, but we're a good balance to one another for sure. And not to mention, playing practical jokes on people growing up. I would get him
yeah.
in a lot of good trouble growing up, but it was
Yeah.
fun. It is fun being a twin.
Did you this is like, did you do the switch like with each
Oh,
other where,
absolutely.
oh, that's hilarious.
Absolutely. What's the point of having an identical twin if you don't actually play practical jokes on people? So I remember it had to be like third or fourth grade, and I have been wanting to switch for a very long time. And of course, him being the strategic thinker, wanting to be the rule follower, he didn't want to do it. But one day he agreed to it, and we switched. We switched classes, and so I went into his class. He went into my class. Like our friends were in on it too, and so they told me like where Brian, that's my twin's name, where Brian sat, and so I sat in the seat, and the plan was going well until the teacher actually made us do work, and I had no idea what they were working on. And then she looked at me, and I looked at her. She's like, "Wait a minute." And then
And
I, re-
did
I
she laugh?
remember
Did she have a good humor about
she
it?
she thought it was cute, but she in the moment she was like, "Okay, you're disrupting my classroom. You got to go back to your class." And then I guess my teacher, who my twin went into the classroom, she didn't think it was funny, and so we were at dinner that night. Then we gotta. This is how long ago it was. We had the landline phones, and then the landline was ringing, and it was that teacher, and she was like, "Do you know what your kids did today?" And she told on us, so we got in trouble for switching class. But it's a memory that
That's
was
so cool.
amazing, and we did it.
I love it. So, like in your childhood, what was your hobbies? What did you like? Did you play sports or did you like, what was your go-to thing as a kid?
Oh, sports. Absolutely
Yeah,
love
you're a sports
sports.
guy.
So, from the time I was in elementary school all the way through high school, and had several scholarship offers. I made a
What was
decision
your
to
sport?
football. So once I got to high school in the fall, it was football. In the winter, it was wrestling. and in the spring, baseball. And so those were my three sports. And I was my natural sport was baseball. Where I excelled at high school was wrestling. I made it to states and did pretty well. Got a couple scholarship offers. It was funny. I was going through my emails the other night and saw some emails from the Naval Academy. My coach, he wrestled at the Naval Academy, which again I'm from Maryland. The Naval Academy is in Maryland, and so we had some offers from Naval Academy and some other smaller schools, but we turned them down. My twin and I, we both wrestled and got some looks, and we turned it down and went to Hampton University for college, where we only focused on academics. But yeah, hobbies growing up, playing sports, listening to music, and just having a good time.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so you just mentioned right now that, so you turned down the scholarships. Was it because you wanted to go to Hampton University and not the other schools?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And hindsight is always 2020. My father was the first one um, in our family, his family, to actually go to college. So he just knew that we had to go to college. And that concept was still relatively new. We just thought it was something that we had to do. And we didn't go to the next level of having a deep understanding of like student debt and going to college that's free. And so in hindsight now, I would go back and tell my younger self, go to a college that's going to pay for it. And it doesn't matter, like just go get it paid for. In that moment, I chose Hampton, and this is the most honest truth. My middle brother went to Hampton, and we went there. This was our senior year, and so we went there, and it was a party, and we had an amazing time. And we were like, you know what? Forget sports, forget everything else. We're going here.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
was a really good party. And they
yeah,
said, look, if you come here, it'll be like this all the time. We were like, wait, all the time? And we're high school kids. Like, we didn't know. We're like, man, forget sports. Like, forget all of those things. We're going here.
yeah,
And then a little bit later, Hampton, they had a on-site admission, like a early on-site admission, which is they'll send some college recruiters to your venue, and you can apply on the spot. And so me and my twin, we applied on the spot. Again, my brother knew the college admissions counselor, and we got accepted. Our grades weren't that good, so it was probationary condition, but we got accepted. And so, yeah, it was a wrap on our senior year. It was like, oh, we got accepted. At that point, it had to be October, and we knew where we were going,
yeah.
and that was that. So
That's cool. And I think it's cool that you and your twin went together. Was that
we
ever, were you
did.
ever a consideration that you would go to separate schools?
No, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. I'm liking this podcast. I don't think I've ever been
Yeah.
asked that. Yeah, we just knew, and we both made the decision to go there. And so I made the decision to solely focus on wrestling, and my brother he kept playing football. One year passed where I did, so he got some looks for football. But we both said, look, like in real life, like we're not that tall. Like we're in my mind, I'm like 6'4", 275, can take on the world. But in reality, I'm like barely scratching 5'9", and I knew football wasn't in my cards. And so ultimately, we both said, look, let's go to Hampton. Let's have the time of our lives. And so we both made that
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. No, and I know you have some degrees. So what did you take at Hampton at first? What program were you in?
I have a few degrees. When I went to
Yeah.
Hampton, I was majoring in parties. I was majoring in parties, but when I went psychology, and so
Yeah.
here's the thing: I had fun, and when you asked about my hobbies, I was always really smart, so I never had to put effort into school. A funny story: when I was in third grade, second or third grade, again, I played around a lot. They actually, I got in trouble, and the principal came and got me, and she was like, "What's going on?" Long story short, I said I was bored. And so she actually looked at my grades and she pushed me to the next grade. That only lasted for 2 weeks because I was too immature for it. But like they put me in tag, which here in the States was talented and gifted. And so schoolwork always came easy to me. And I was always naturally curious and wanted to push boundaries. So by the time I got to Hampton, like I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to. I knew I wasn't gonna make it to the NFL. I knew I wasn't gonna go to the Olympics for wrestling. So the fallback was to become a psychologist, and I always wanted to do that. And I figured I could play around, and then at some point, like I would catch up. But yeah, like my focus was always to become a psychologist. So I majored in psychology after Hampton because I came in and I didn't do that great academically. I couldn't go straight to a doc program. I had to go the master's route first. And I went to Abilene Christian University, which is located in West Texas. Got my specialist degree, which is a master's plus internship. And I said, hey, there's still so much more that I need to learn. And then after that, I went to IUP, which is Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is where I got my doctorate, again, in school psychology.
How did your experience as a child being in a class where you were bored impact you later in life when you started working with schools and the psychology of children and learning? How did you make those connections?
I am loving this podcast. Like no one normally it's always the same questions, it's the same typical thing. But these are great questions. And so for me, I recognize it in the young people who I work with. Like that is the most straightforward answer because I was that kid. And it's black males who look like me who you go in a classroom and I'm coming in with the lens of, okay, what's happening in the classroom environment? You say the kid's off task, you say the kid's impulsive, but then I'm looking at, is the kid actively being engaged? What strategies is the teacher using? Is the student exhibiting leadership characteristics? Like, is he demonstrating that you put him in front of a classroom and he can explain all the concepts like that? I was that kid. And so not all, but in some of the young people who I work with, it allowed me to go in with the lens of looking for what are some of the strengths, what are some of the qualities in this young person that are there, but they might be missed because a teacher has X amount of kids in the classroom and they don't have the time, they don't have the luxury to identify these things. I wanted to go in with the lens of looking at, as I say, what's strong with young people and helping in collaboration teachers to kind of cultivate that because I absolutely had people cultivate that in me as well. Miss Moore, who was the principal at the elementary school at the time, who noticed that gift in me where I didn't notice it in myself. I've always wanted to identify that gift in other people as well. And so it's just always gave me a lens of looking to uncover what other people can't necessarily see in young people. And also holding young kids, young students, especially black males and all students, accountable. I had adults who held me accountable as well. Like when I was switching classes with my twin, Miss Moore, who was the principal, said, okay, you can't do this. Like, it was funny. It's a good laugh. You're identical twin. Now you're going to go back in your classroom and do what you're supposed to do. And whatever the sequence is, if it was the next year, again, Miss Moore, when I said I was bored, I think it was the year before, because I think it was second and third, and I think we switched third and fourth, whatever it was. That's when I was bored. She said, okay. She pushed me forward. I was still acting immature. She put me back in my right class and says, you're smart. Now your behavior, you have to mature and you have to be accountable for your actions as well. And I've had people in my life at elementary, at middle, at high school to ensure I was accountable. Why? It's setting high expectations for me. So in the young people who I work with, we have to set high expectations. And so all the young people who I work with, like that's just a priority. And one of the things that I loved about what you all are doing with your school, and going through some of your values and missions, that you all have high expectations and you all don't shy away from that. And I think I named that a couple of times during my talk to your staff
Mhm.
because like that's just so important to me. So that has really helped shape my lens as a practitioner.
Yeah, yeah. What was it about you that was driving you to keep going, to get your PhD? Like, what's the value inside you, or the driving force that makes you keep on going and push yourself?
In my book, Hacking Deficit Thinking, I talk about people knowing their strengths. And one of my top five strengths is achiever. And that drive is just naturally in me. My second strength is competition. So those two strengths, achiever and competition, like mixed together, I want to win. I want to be the best at whatever I do. And so I naturally have this drive to find a way, no matter the circumstance or no matter what I'm going through, no matter where I am, to be the best at what I'm doing. And so once I pivoted away, which now makes sense why I love sports, once I pivoted away from sports and I had my fun, I had to get back to business. And for me, I took that same mindset and mentality of playing sports and applied it to academics. And it gave me an edge of, okay, I'm going to be the best at this. I'm going to study. And there's so many parallels between sports and for me, academics. In sports, you had to study film, right? In academics, like you got to study. And so
Yeah.
don't judge me. I didn't start studying until like college, until like my sophomore year. Well, the end of my freshman year, me and my twin, we were put on academic probation because we were partying a lot, and we had to go to summer school to make up for it. And I remember one professor, shout out to the late Dr. Foster, he pulled me and my twin to the side, and he saw the potential in us, and he said, "You all don't know how to study, do you?" I was like, "I never had to." Like, why would I? And so he set us up with some tutors, and we had to learn how to study. I could study playbooks and everything. And so as I'm learning to study, I just made the connection that, okay, I have to study like I'm preparing to go out for a championship game or I'm about to go up against Allen Johnson. Shout out to Allen Johnson. When I wrestled, Allen Johnson he was number one. I was always number two. And I studied so much to learn his moves,
Yeah.
his. I tried to anticipate, and I could never quite get him. But I studied that, and so I took that same approach and applied it to my academics, and that allowed me to really learn so much about psychology, about mental health, about well-being, about people, about humans, about our interactions, about what makes us tick, what makes us fall in love, what makes us do the odd and bizarre things that we do, what makes us feel connected, what makes us feel isolated, what makes us feel loved, what makes us feel alone, what makes us feel happy, what makes us feel sad. Understanding human emotion, understanding the different philosophies and approaches to it. And I just fell in love with psychology on a deep, deep level. And then in college, where I had to learn and take classes around like algebra and calculus and stats and all the other stuff I didn't care about. Once I got to graduate school and I'm just studying psychology and principles and theory, oh, that was easy for me. And
Yeah.
so I thrived.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You're saying love and love, and I know you have a wife and three children. So when did you meet your wife along your life journey?
Random enough, I met my wife when I went to graduate school in West Texas. Now, keep in mind, I grew up in PG County, went to Hampton University, and just the odds, like it's like one male to 20 females at Hampton University or something like that. And I had a good time at Hampton. And then my plan was to go to West Texas where it's like rural and not that many people. I wanted to focus. I wanted to be locked
Yeah.
in. And I wasn't thinking about meeting anybody. And I got there and I met my wife. So that's actually where we met. Was at Abilene. And started dating a few semesters into graduate school. And once we started dating, we spent every moment together with one another. A few years later, well, in my internship, moved back to Maryland. A couple years later, got married, and then kids, and yeah, the whole family thing.
Yeah. Tell me about your kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You have three?
I have three of them. They are. I have gray hairs now. I
Yeah.
love them dearly. I have an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And it's funny. All the things that I said about me as a kid, I see it in all of
Right.
my kids.
That's
So,
awesome.
but they are amazing. My oldest son, um, he's 11. He's about as tall as me. He is the real kind of gifted to where like I was gifted and I didn't apply myself in school, at least in elementary, middle, and high school. I was, again, just having fun. My son is like, he was identified gifted. We moved to Texas 2 years ago. And as soon as he got here, he took, they have what's called star testing, and he scored off the charts. And so they placed him in accelerated classes, and he got straight A's. And so he's exceptionally gifted. My 8-year old, I mean, super intelligent. Like, she has my personality through and through. If she was here, she would be there. They started summer camp today. She would be doing literally flips. She taught herself how to do backflips. So she loves gymnastics, cheer, dance. She's very creative, loves to do hair. That's my creative child. And so we have so many similarities. And then my 2-year-old is a mix of all of those things and keeping me up at night. But yeah, those are
Yeah.
my three kids. Love them dearly.
Yeah, that's awesome. That must be a very busy house that you have with three.
Yes. Very busy, but a
Yeah,
blessing nonetheless.
of course. Yeah. When you look back on your life and your accomplishments, what makes you the most proud?
You're really good at this podcast.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
Like I'm getting all the questions I've just never been asked before. Okay, so when I look back at
These
my
are the
life,
interesting questions, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
learning about people.
Yes, yes, yes. It's learning about people aside from just the professional work. Okay. So when I look back at my life, what makes me the most proud? I want to say 2022, but I was speaking in Boston for my national association, the National Association of School Psychologists. And the field of school psychology is predominantly white, like 87% white female. Those are the stats. It's less than 1% black males. And so I'm speaking at our national association, and the audience reflects those numbers. So let's say if it's 300 people in this room, 90% are white female. I could count there were three black males in that room, and I'm talking to this room about equity and social justice and how to create change. And I felt in that moment like I was a hypocrite because I'm talking about it and nothing is changing. Like the room didn't reflect what I was talking about. And I felt that there was so much work that the National Association could be doing. And I never put the onus on other people. Again, I put it on myself. That's just part of my makeup. So in that moment, I had an idea to create a network, to create an organization for Black school psychologists. And so I left, finished the talk, finished the speech. I sat on the idea for a little bit and then say, you know what? Let's just put it out there. So I made a tweet about it, and I tweeted. I said, what if there was a conference or summit or network for Black school psychologists where we come and talk about topics, important to us? And I put it out there, and it got so much attention. And there were four individuals who said, "Hey, we have to do this." And so myself, those four individuals, we all came together and we created the Black School Psychologist Network. And so
Cool.
out of this idea, in a moment of talking about something, but then seeing the disparities, jumped into action. And so we created the Black School Psychologist Network, which is now a 501c3. It's a nonprofit organization. And our mission is to support, elevate, and advance the work of Black school psychologists. And that year, or 2023, we had our first Black School Psychologist Summit. And we convened over 300, 400 Black school psychologists in Atlanta, Georgia. It was one of the most powerful things that I've experienced. And we just had our second one in Atlanta this year. And same thing. And just hearing the impact that this event, this summit, this network is having on people. People are saying they wanted to leave the field. They felt isolated. They didn't feel connected. But because of this network, like, they know that there's other Black practitioners, that they feel connected, that they feel seen, that they feel validated in their work. That's one of the most powerful things that I'm just super proud of. And one of the reasons why I'm really proud of it is it started as an idea to where I'm on stage, I'm looking out, and I'm visualizing this event out of need. And then to actually take that idea and to work with an amazing team to create it and bring that vision into fruition, that's something I'm very proud of.
That's a
Yeah,
pretty
that's
that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. That's a big one. Um, I mean, of course, family, having a family, being a dad, that's an ongoing thing that I'm proud of. Um, Teaching my kids how to ride bikes, having moments for my kids where they reach milestones. Always proud of those things. Um, can go through professional accolades. I mean, there's, there's a number of things, but in this moment, um, having a vision and then bringing it into life to where it impacts people is something that I'm very proud of.
From a very active childhood, now as an adult, how do you spend your leisure time? Are you still active? Are you still sporty? What are your hobbies currently?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Now I am into tech a significant amount. Like, I am loving all things large language models, generative AI. I absolutely love technology. And if I could go back and do school over, I would probably be an engineer or some sort of. That's not true. Maybe law school, but definitely engineer. But I am all things coding, all things tech. Because my kids are into sports now, I'm still connected and, going outside, playing with them. Um, I recognize I'm not going to the NFL anytime soon. So it's funny because I was just outside. And we're about to go on vacation, trying to get back in a little bit of shape so I can look like I'm not out here just totally
Hey,
dad bodding it up. No, I want to look right for vacation. And so I thought I was in high school, and we used to do sprints, and I'm sprinting, and I'm going like 50 yards back and forth, and I'm crushing it. I'm absolutely crushing it. It's like, you know what? I'm going to do 100 yards. And I was crushing it until I wasn't. And I felt something in my hamstring, and I was like,
Oh,
"Did I just pull my hamstring?"
oh,
And so,
that's
yeah,
too bad. Oh, when
yeah.
those like little
So
reminders of just like ding, you are not as young as you used to be. Like,
definitely not. So got these
oh,
great gray hairs to remind me, and a pull hamstring to keep it fresh in my mind. But yeah, just trying to stay active. Trying to make sure I'm getting out with the kids. But
yeah.
definitely one of my favorite activities now is all things generative AI and large language models for sure.
So, where do you see AI fitting in education?
Yeah, I believe deeply that AI as a tool can give us as educators the time back that we've lost and we've got really far away from. Educators, our roles have shifted drastically to administrative tasks in the sense of over reliance and a fixation on compliance, on paperwork, on meeting stringent like deadlines of more paperwork, and if you don't get the paperwork in by this time, then it's going to be more paperwork, and it's documentation and all of these things, and it's just getting us away from the craft of teaching. It's getting us away from the craft of, as a psychologist, working within my full scope. And so what happens when we know there's teacher shortages and teachers are leaving the field and practitioners are leaving the field and it's more and more paperwork, we're only limited to practicing within a very small scope of our work. Whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a counselor, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a special education teacher, it doesn't matter what your role is. It limits the scope. What I believe and what I know is that this technology will give us time back. How? By automating a lot of those tasks that we frankly shouldn't be doing anyway. Dr. Richard Collada, he's the president of ASCD, which is a big organization here in the States for school administrators and district leaders. And he stands firmly on there are so many tasks that educators are doing that we just shouldn't be spending our time on. So I believe if we can find ways to automate the things that we just shouldn't be spending hours doing anyway, it will give us the time back. And not just the time, it'll give us the cognitive capacity to fall back in love with the job in the first place. It'll
And the
give us
kids.
the and the kids. And I've been using this phrase, if we can actually leverage these models, then we can focus on less paperwork and more of the heart work that we got into this to do in the very first place.
Hmm.
There will be a learning curve, there are ethical considerations, there will be limitations. There's so much that we have to consider and figure out, but I believe, I know that we can leverage this technology to help us get back to the essence of our job.
I love your optimism. I mean, you're so optimistic about AI, and your book is optimistic about taking children, however they come to us, and hacking how we view them, and seeing them as like just diverse learners that we can optimize in our classroom and meet their needs. And where does your optimism stem? Like, where does that come from?
I think it goes back to my top strengths. And because I'm an achiever, because I'm competitive, there has to be a way. There just has to be a way for things to work out. And I just believe that. And I also think it's important to say that there's a science to the way we think, to the way we act, right? And if you think you're going to get a negative outcome, it doesn't guarantee that you will get a negative outcome, but it sure increases the odds. If you think you'll get a favorable outcome, It's not a guarantee you'll get a favorable outcome, but it sure increases the odds. And so I've just always thought, if I think something, then I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen. And so it's not I always, and the more I'm talking about things from my book and the strength-based philosophy, the more and more I have to stress, it is not this toxic, positive, overly optimistic view of the world. And I will go as far to argue that is a very dangerous way to view the world, right? If you see the world through a deficit lens, that has its own harms. But if you only see rainbows and butterflies and glitter everywhere, that's going to do the same amount of harm. And I believe that deeply too. Look, my daughter, she has very real speech concerns. She has a speech pathologist. She's getting support in school for it. I told you, she's one of the most creative people I know.
Sure.
And if we only focused on that, we would be doing a disservice, not acknowledging the very real challenges that are there. And so while I am very optimistic, I am also a practical realist as well, right? Because if you're just hoping in the wind, you're going to be
Right.
hoping for a long time. There has to be actions to back it up. And so for me, I will believe something, but I'm going to put in the work to make sure that it gets done as well. Because I have to have that faith in myself that you can want something, but if you don't do anything, look, I could want abs for this trip I'm about to take. But if I'm eating fudge rounds and I'm in Texas now, they have some amazing tacos. And if there's good food, right? And if I'm not putting in the work to actually go out to run the sprints that I was saying I'm doing, or doing sit ups and push ups and putting in the work, then I will never get a six pack. So there has to be work associated with these things as well.
I appreciated your book so much and you reframing our perspective of children. My daughter has dyslexia, and actually, she was the keynote speaker the year before you. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, or 2 years before, maybe. I can't remember. No, it was 2 years before you. She spoke to the teachers at the same learning summit about diversity and equity and her experience in the school district. And this is exactly what she was saying. It's just like, I have the abilities, you just need to approach my learning from with more options and maybe like different ways to look at it. So I always appreciate it when people are talking about the children that have so much potential, and we just need to like think outside the way we usually do things.
That's right. And I see it because I've been able to do some really cool things. I've worked early childhood, elementary, all the way through high school. And then with adults at the leadership level, and because of my training, I can see the developmental lifespan. And I see when these things aren't adequately addressed, or when when it's not cultivated at a young age, how that shows up in adulthood. And we got to
Interesting.
grow up, right? And so what happens, you'll have adults who aren't living to their full potential. Well, what does that look like? It's things like worthlessness. It's things like living in isolation. It's things like imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve to be here. I'm not going to apply for that job. Well, why? Because these things weren't cultivated in you, or people were hyper focused on this deficit lens growing up. And now you have this deficit ideology that you weren't born with, it was passed down to you, it was cultivated in you. And now you're an adult who has this lens. And we talk about the definition of it's this cloudy lens of you see the world around you through of what you can't do. And I don't think we have to accept that. I know we can change our lens. It takes work to do that, but I believe we can do it. And if we don't, the consequences of it can be dire.
I think the work you're doing is so important, and not only are you doing great work, but you're amplifying that with your books and your
Oh,
Um,
my nonprofit, the Black School
you're,
Psychologist Network.
yeah, you're getting the words out there. You're getting it known and not just kind of working in your own little bubble and just doing your work, and I appreciate how big you're trying to make it. Like it's like you're trying to like scream it, and I feel like you have a lot of great things to say about kids and about our approach to learning, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been such a pleasure. When we find out when you find out more about the people. Oh, I did have one last question. On your book, your co-author is Kelsey Reed. So how do you know Kelsey, and what is your connection to her?
Yeah, I got connected with Kelsey years ago. I was presenting at NASP, the National Association of School Psychologists. I think it was in Chicago, and I had to post a presentation. I had just finished mine, and she was presenting on a similar theme around, equity and discipline, and things that I was interested in. And so I was asking her questions about her work, and we stayed in contact. And then as a practitioner, I just always followed her work and thought that she did exceptional work. Had the opportunity to write this book, and asked her, "Hey, would you want to co-author? We have some similarities in our research interests, and just the things that we both have been committed to." And she agreed, and then we wrote the book.
Amazing. That's awesome. And how long did it take you to write? And do you enjoy the writing process?
It took us, because we went through a publisher, I want to say it was about 8 months from start
Okay.
to finish. And do I enjoy the writing process? Out of all the questions you asked,
Sorry.
now I do. Before, I did not. If you put me in a room of 10,000 people, I will get up on that stage and I'll give a speech of a lifetime. I don't even need to prep for it. I'll just do it. Again, how we started this podcast. Count me in, lights, camera, actions. I'm ready to go. But if you say, now take everything you said and put it on paper, like, wait, what? You want me to do what? Like, why would I do that? That's a struggle for me, right? That's a very real challenge. Writing wasn't something that I just enjoyed because it didn't come easy to me. I had to work at it. And so getting the ideas, the thoughts, like I just told you, like I'm speaking and think about that. As I'm speaking, I'm having an epiphany of what could come with the Black School Psych Network. So I'm having this vision created in my brain as I'm still actively engaging the audience. And so my
Interesting.
brain works in a very creative way like that. That's easy to me. But then to translate into paper and organize it, like it would take me in a ridiculously long time. But now, with the advent of things like artificial intelligence and these large language models, it can help me to organize my thoughts, to help me flesh out my ideas. Not to write it for me. I don't need you to this intelligence to write it for me, but the structure, the flow, the organization, the grammar, like it can help. And
Yeah, yeah.
so it makes that writing process less intimidating to where now I won't say I enjoy it, but I can absolutely convey my ideas in a meaningful way to audiences.
Listen, you are just such a like friendly, easygoing, very easy to talk to kind of guy, and I have enjoyed interviewing you. This has been really, really fun, and I thank you again for your time. I don't want to take up any more of it. I really, really appreciate getting to know you. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you all for taking the time out to speak with me. And actually, the questions I haven't been asked. It was absolutely my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Just to Know You.
We would like to thank our amazing tech man, Mr. Kent Arimura, Sterling McDonald for the podcast music, and the SAES community. See you next time.
If you know anyone who you think has a great story to tell, we would love to hear about it. Please send an email to either Angela, Darian, or Kent.